Hello everyone, my name is Minisethi. I hope you all are staying healthy. Today we are going to talk about input-output analysis. Input-output analysis given by Wesley Leontief. That's why it is also known as the Leontief Model. And this analysis explains interdependence between industries. This analysis explains interdependence between industry. According to this analysis, industries don't work in isolation, they depend on each other. That means output of one industry become input for another industry. For example, wheat is a final output for agriculture sector, but wheat uses as an input for food processing industry. Similar, paper is a final output for paper industry, but paper is a crucial input for newspaper printing industry. So here you can see final output of one industry become input for other industry. That means industries sell their output to other industries so that they can use it as a input. So according to this analysis, industries are depend on each other. They don't work in isolation. So this analysis explain interdependence among industries so that we can know how to achieve equilibrium between demand and supply. Now we'll see assumption. Each industry produces only one homogeneous product. That means each industry produces single standardized product. For example, as we know, there are so many types of wheat. But in this model, we assume agriculture sector will produce only one type of wheat and all other types are constant. Fixed input proportion. Each industry will purchase input at a fixed proportion no matter what is supply of input based on linear homogeneous production function. Linear homogeneous production function means this model based on constant return to scale. Constant return to scale means change in output is same as you change input. For example, if you double your input, your output will also double. Static model, because this model study about interdependence among industries at specific time period, and this model doesn't consider change in prices, technologies and resources. That's why this model is static. Final demand is exogenous. That means final demand is determined by outside the model. Closed economy, because in this model we don't talk about international trade. So what Xij represent in this model? X represent industries. Ij represent output of I industry we are using as an input in J industry. Ij represent output of I industry we are using as an input in J industry. As we know, coal is output for coal industry, but coal is crucial input for steel industry. Here we assume I is a coal industry and J is a steel industry because we are using output of coal industry as an input for steel industry. For the sake of simplicity, here we assume we have only 4 industries: X1, X2, X3 and X4. F1, F2, F3 and F4 are final demand of industries which is determined by outside the model as we earlier discussed in assumption. F1 is demand of X1 industry, F2 is demand of X2 industry. Similar, F3 and F4 are demand of X3 and X4 industry. And L is labor, which is our prime factor in this model we assume. Now we will see input-output table. We are talking about 4 industries: X1, X2, X3 and X4. Here we also wrote X1, X2, X3 and X4. Here we wrote input because column represent input which industries are purchasing from another industry. Here we wrote input because this column represent input which industries are purchasing from another industry. Here we wrote output because this row represent distribution of output of industry among another industries. So here we wrote labor. L1 labor belongs to X1 industry, L2 belong to X2 industry, L3 belong to X3 industry, L4 belong to X4 industry. Similar, here we wrote final demand. F1 belong to X1 industry, F2 belong to X2 industry. Similar, F3, F4 belong to X3 and X4 industry. Now please listen carefully. What does this X11 represent? X11 represent we are using output of first industry as a input for first industry. X11 represent we are using output of first industry as a input for first industry. Yes, this is true. Sometime industry uses their own output as a input for further production. For example, sometimes steel industry uses steel as an input for further production. Similar, paper industry use recycled paper as a raw material for the production of new paper. So, X11 represent we are using output of one industry as a input for one industry. X12 represent we are using output of one industry as a input for second industry. Similar, 13 represent we are using output of one industry as a input for third industry. Similar, 14 represent we are using output of first industry as a input for fourth industry. Similar, you can see in other cases, 21 represent we are using output of second industry as a input for first industry. X22 represent we are using output of second industry as a input for second industry. Similar, X23 represent we are using output of second industry as an input for third industry. Similar, you can see other cases. 43 represent we are using output of fourth industry as an input for third industry. 44 represent we are using output of fourth industry as an input for fourth industry. Similar, you can see other cases. Now we will see cost, revenue and profit of industries. First of all, we will see cost, revenue and profit of X1 industry. What do you mean by revenue? Revenue means income of industry. An industry can earn income by selling their output in market. So here you can see in this case X11 company is using their own output as an input. Obviously through this process it will generate some income. Plus here you can see second industry using output of first industry as an input, or you can say that first industry selling their output to second industry. When first industry selling their output to second industry, obviously in return it will receive some income. So it is part of their income. Plus in this case, third industry using output of first industry as a input, obviously first industry in return will receive some income. Plus in this case, fourth industry using output of first industry as an input, this is also part of income. Plus this is final demand of a first industry in market. When we add all these variables, it will become equal to total income of a first industry. So here you can see revenue of first industry is equal to X11 plus X12, X13 plus X14 plus F1 final demand. So this row represents total income of X1 industry. What's about cost? Cost means if you buy input, obviously this is cost, and the cost include input which industry is buying from another industries. So this column, this part will be called cost of X1 industry. X11 represent industry using their own output as an input. If they are using own output as an input, this is part of their cost, no? This represent company 1 using output of a second industry. In return, they will pay some money, part of their cost. Plus, this represent first industry using output of a third industry, part of cost. This represents first industry using output of fourth industry, part of cost. L1 means first industry using some amount of labor. If you are using labor, in return you pay money. This is also part of your cost. So this column represent cost of first industry, and this row represent revenue of first industry. So here you can see cost equal to x11 plus x12 plus x31 plus x41 plus L1 labor. This is revenue of a first industry. This is cost of second industry. When we minus revenue from cost, it will become equal to profit of a first industry. Similar, we can calculate for second industry. This part will be called, this row will be called revenue of second industry, and this column will be called cost of second industry. Similar, this row will be called revenue of a third industry, and this column will be called cost of third industry. Similar, this part will be called, this row will be called revenue of a fourth industry, and this column will be called cost of a fourth industry. So by this way we can calculate cost, revenue and profit of industry. Now we will see significance of input output analysis. This analysis help to understand interdependence among industries. This analysis help to understand how change in one sector can influence entire economy, because all sectors are interdependent. This analysis help in resources allocation, investment strategy. This analysis provide a framework for economic planning by studying interconnection among industries. This analysis also highlight weakness of particular sector and give suggestion how to improve it. Now we will see criticism. This analysis based on a fixed input proportion, but in reality proportion of input never remain fixed. This analysis based on constant return to scale, but in reality there is increasing return to scale, diminishing return to scale. This is static model because this ignore changes in economy, but in reality economy is continuous changing. This model based on closed economy and ignore international trade, but international trade is very important. This model ignore change in technology. So this is all about input output analysis. I think you got it, and thank you so much for watching this video. Bye, take care.